de consequentie daarvan.
Laten we even zo meteen kijken naar wat horrorbeelden. U moet zelf maar zien of u ze wilt zien. Je kan ook je ogen een beetje dicht doen, zo door je oogharen kijken. En we doen dat omdat eind van deze week het jaarlijkse Weekend of Horror plaatsvindt voor de 11e keer. En dat is altijd totaal uitverkocht, het evenement. Dat wist ik ook niet. Maar goed, Tuschinski in Amsterdam en Lumière in Rotterdam vertonen 2 nachten lang op grote doeken alleen maar horrorfilms. En nou, vroeger, ik had nog iets van horror, dat is Frankenstein en spinnenwebben en vampiers en zo. Maar tegenwoordig is het echt afgehakte hoofden, steken in ogen en die dan ook weer opeten, geloof ik. Nou ja, dat soort liefhebberijen. En je kan de kaartjes niet aanslepen. Mensen willen er allemaal heen. Het is, moet ik u ernstig zeggen, meer dan dom vermaak. Wat ik zelf een beetje dacht. Maar het wordt enorm serieus benaderd door allerlei filmcritici. Wij zijn gaan praten met een van de makers van de moderne horrorfilms.
To me, the biggest challenge is to make it scary. And I feel like my movies haven't been very scary. So so I keep trying. Each time I try to make it scary. I want to scare the audience. I want to entertain them. There was a tendency throughout the 80s for things to get more and more explicit with the gore and violence. I think one reason is because people get used to it. They want to see more. And also because the action movies co-opted a lot of the violence and gore that we used to only get from horror movies. So now if you go see an action movie, a Lethal Weapon or an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or a Sylvester Stallone movie, whoa, they do stuff that they never used to. And so it's tough to compete.
You make the incision at the base of the skull. Cutting away enough of the fascia to get your fingers in.
Did you have to deal a lot with censorship?
With only in the insofar as getting a rating goes. Now the first film I did, which was Reanimator, I was the producer, and I raised all the money myself. I borrowed the money and made the film. I didn't even bother taking it to a rating because I didn't want to hold back at all.
You take the bone saw and you cut around the perimeter.
We did cut things out of the movie that that were very explicit, and we cut them out not because of a rating, but because we showed the film to audiences, and we found that there was a point at which that it would get so explicit that the audience would, in their minds, get out of the film. It would quit being effective.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The human brain.
There's a scene of an autopsy of a head where the Dr. Hill shows the class a brain. He cuts the skull and takes out a brain. There was a tremendous, that was all done in great detail. The cutting of the skull, the taking it off, the taking out the brain, all of that stuff was done in great detail and in Stuart Gordon's original cut. Well, when we showed it to preview audiences, we would find that they didn't like that. That the horror audience, in my opinion, liked to have the fun of the horror, but they didn't like something that was so realistic. That was a cadaver. It was real, you know, within the context of the movie. Of course, it was a puppet, but that there was nothing fun about it. If it had come to life, they would have liked it. You see what I mean? But that kind of gore wasn't fun to them. It was kind of depressing.
Why is it so nice to scare people? Can you explain that?
I don't know. I guess it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you that. I mean, if I could, it's fun to make them laugh too, you know. It's fun to make, you know, to make a movie and see it work with an audience. It's a great deal of fun. And if you're a fan of the genre like I am, I enjoy these kind of movies. I go see them. You know, if I'm looking in the newspaper to see what's playing, and they can have some very big movies, and then they'll have a cheap horror movie or a cheap genre picture that I know won't be as good of quality. I'll go see the genre one because I really enjoy them, and I like the ideas. There's something great, something very dreamlike about these fantastic images. You know, something that speaks to our unconscious. When you see someone carrying a head around, it's totally absurd, but there's something that we think about with that.
Thrust and hold!
You ever consider the potential negative effect these films might have on people?
I've thought about it, but I don't really see that. You know, at least certainly certainly it's difficult for me to see how they could have a tremendous negative effect. You know, with children, of course, there's things that could have a negative effect, but you know, children, there's a lot of things at certain ages kids shouldn't see. But
Like what?
well, I think that there's certainly sexual pictures as well as violence that at different ages it's not appropriate for kids. But I think once you're grown up, it's difficult for me to believe that movies are going to make you, you know, do things. You know, when you look at history, I was in Milan about a year ago, and I went to the Museum of Torture, and they had all the implements of torture from the Middle Ages, and they described how to use them, and they had depictions of it. And, you know, the kinds of things that people have done to one another are beyond belief, beyond belief. And they not only didn't have movies, they didn't have radio, they didn't have books. You know what I mean? I don't think that any kinds of arts have ever been responsible for the kind of violence and horrors that mankind has propagated upon itself time and time again.
My God, Santa, what the hell did you do?
Let's get the fuck out of here! Santos, we bleed.
I'm sure that Schindler's List might inspire somebody to do something as well, and yet is this an indictment of the movie? And obviously Schindler's List has higher aspirations than Return of the Living Dead 3 does. But on the other hand, there's some incredible violence in that movie. It's a real horror. And it could be that some skinheads might look at the ghettoization of the Jews in the film and imagine themselves in the position of the SS. I wouldn't doubt it. I know in North America there was a shooting in one movie theater that was playing it. You know, I'm just using it as an example because that's probably a film that you couldn't believe could have a negative effect, and yet I think that almost anything can. You know, at what point do you start not depicting things? You know, do you censor Bosch? You know, I mean, I'd love to get his stuff on screen. You know, but do you censor him?
I see myself, Kurt.
When I make these films, I'm very happy to try to master the genre and do something different. But to make it interesting to me, to make me want to get involved in it, I layer many, many different ideas. On Return of the Living Dead 3, really the focus of it for me was the love story between Kurt and Julie, and also the idea of Julie being a zombie and having to deal with becoming inhuman. And when she didn't have love, she would give herself pain, or else she would lose her humanity. And this is something I think is very common. If you took Return of the Living Dead 3 and took out all the zombies and took out all the fantastic stuff, you could still play the story straight. And if you made her a drug addict, you would see the exact same dynamic. I see it as being like an iceberg. And just the tip of it does the audience see. But underneath is most of the work is ideational. And that's the stuff that I see, and that's the fun of doing it, and that's the stuff that makes it really satisfying to make the film.
Don't sound stupid to me.
It doesn't? You don't think it sounds crazy?
Hell no. Sounds like you got something inside you. You just gotta get out. Me and my things. I figure if people found out what they had inside them and how to get it out, there'd be a lot more happy people.
My films, now I may be proven wrong. You'll say somebody just ate their mother because they saw a movie I did. But I really think that my films don't quite have that kind of effect. I don't feel like they're, you know, I don't feel like they're morbidly misdirected. I really think that the focus comes through, even if it's on a subconscious level. That's my defense.